the chief emotional officer. In a family business, in the most healthy family business, each of the three circles I talked about has a clear and defined leader. Usually that is absolutely the easiest thing for when I'm talking about this. It's in the business. That person is ultimately accountable for, is there profit or is there loss this year? It's their job to stay on track with the business plan. It's their job to hold the leadership team accountable. It's their job to make sure the business is still growing at the rate the owners want it to grow. It's their job to give the owners what the owners want. So that's the leader of the business circle. The owner circle needs to have a leader. Sometimes that looks like the chair of the board or a majority stakeholder or shareholder. That person's job is to make sure all the owners are on the same page, that all of the owners are giving clear direction to the leader of the business. The other really important job of that leader of the ownership is, I said this earlier on the call, is to maximize opportunity for the family and for the business while minimizing risk for the family and the business. That's a fairly obvious leader. The leader that often gets overlooked is the leader of the family circle. That person is called, if the leader of the business circle is the CEO, the leader of the family circle is also called the CEO. They're the chief emotional officer. That is a real job. It is very important. And it is incredibly, a great chief emotional officer does a huge amount of risk management for the business. They are often the person pushing for that squishy, feely stuff that we talked about at the top of the call. They're often the person who's asking for that. They're often the person making sure the family gets together and doesn't talk about the business for once. They're the one breaking ties sometimes inside of the family. Two people are not getting along. If there needs to be more clarity, they will jump in and bring clarity to tough conversations. They're often the person who will push to have the important conflict or discussion that is needed in the family. That role is rarely named. Chief Emotional Officer is the fun name for it. That person is rarely paid, which is very sad to me. I think that person should be paid for that work. And I can go on and on about that if anybody wants to hear detail on that. But here's the other thing that is almost always ignored is the importance of succession for the chief emotional officer. In the healthiest family businesses, that role is defined and it's clear, and a new person takes over that role in the next generation. What has happened in many family businesses is someone just steps into that role. Not always, but quite often, the chief emotional officer is a mom. And in many situations, the person who steps in is a daughter in the next generation. Not required, that's just often what I see. Somebody steps into that role. Without clarity about that role and doing it on purpose, sometimes no one steps into the role. Or there's a fight about who steps into the role. Both are risky for the business. If there's a fight over who does it or no one steps into it, it means there's a void. There's not a person leading the family circle. There's not a person making sure traditions can continue. There's not a person being kind of the glue for the family or keeping their pulse on how healthy is our family. It's wildly valuable to make sure there is succession in your chief emotional officer or in that leader of the family circle. I have seen fairly often, but not always, that if there are only brothers in a next generation, that is harder to find a chief emotional officer. Not always, but I've seen it fairly often. I don't know if it's gender or what. I don't even really care what the root cause is. I've just seen it happen regularly. And when you purposely say, this is how we will manage the family circle, whether it's only brothers or only sisters, I'll actually tell you this. I work with a family business. It's only sisters in the next generation. They have decided to take, they have a word for it. 3-year terms as the chief emotional officer. 3-year terms. One sister is going to do it for 3 years, then the next one, the next one. They're starting that work while their mom is still alive. Mom is tired of hosting family gatherings. She wants to only host one now instead of all of them. Mom's going to keep hosting, I think it's the July 4th party. The daughters are going to take turns in 3-year terms. They figured that out because the oldest daughter's youngest kid is about to leave, like fly out of the nest. And so 3 years after that, the next oldest daughter will have kids flying the nest. And then 3 years later, the youngest daughter is probably still going to have kids around. But anyway, that's how they figured out 3-year terms.